Greetings from Exam Heist. We have identified important exam questions. Practice these important questions 2-3 times to get 100% success in exam. Subscribe and comment, share PDF in the below comment section to get PDF of these 40 important questions. If you want to access full dump, please visit www.examheist.com. We have 24/7 support available for your doubts and exam queries. Question 1. You have a table in an Azure Synapse Analytics dedicated SQL pool. The table was created by using the following transact SQL statement. You need to alter the table to meet the following requirements. Ensure that users can identify the current manager of employees. Support creating an employee reporting hierarchy for your entire company. Provide fast lookup of the manager's attributes such as name and job title. Which column should you add to the table? Option A. Manager employee id, smallant null. Option B. Manager employee key, smallant null. Option C. Manager employee key, int null. Option D. Manager name, voucher, 200. Now choose the correct answer. Correct answer is option C. Manager employee key, int null. Question 2. You have an Azure Synapse workspace named My Workspace that contains an Apache Spark database named MyTest. You run the following command in an Azure Synapse Analytics Spark pool in My Workspace. Create table MyTest MyPerQuit table. Employee id int, employee name string, employee start date. Using perquit you then use Spark to insert a row into MyTest MyPerQuit table. The row contains the following date. 1 minute later, you execute the following query from a serverless SQL pool in My Workspace. Select employee id from MyTest DB or MyPerQuit table where employee name equals Alice. What will be returned by the query? Option A 24, option B an error, option C a null value. Choose the correct answer. Correct answer is option B, an error. Question 3. You have files and folders in Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 for an Azure Synapse workspace as shown in the following exhibit. You create an external table named extension table that has location equals top folder. When you query extension table by using an Azure Synapse Analytics serverless SQL pool, which files are returned? Option A file 2, CSV and file 3, CSV only. Option B, file 1 CSV and file 4, CSV only. Option C, file 1 CSV, file 2, CSV, file 3 CSV, and file 4, CSV. Option D, file 1 CSV only. Choose the correct answer. Correct answer is option B, file 1 CSV and file 4, CSV only. Question 4. You are designing the folder structure for an Azure Data Lake Storage Gen to contain a users will query data by using a variety of services including Azure Databricks and Azure's in-apps Analytics serverless SQL pools. The data will be secured by subject area. Most queries will include data from the current year or current month. Which folder structure should you recommend to support fast queries and simplified folder security? Option A, subject area, data source, dd, mm, yyyy, file data, yyyy, ddcsv. Option B, dd, mm, yyyy, subject area, data source, file data, yyyy, ddcsv. Option C, yyyy, mm, dd, subject area, data source, file data, YYYY, MM, DDCSV. Option D, subject area, comma, data source, comma, YYYY, comma, MM, comma, DD, file data, YYYY, MM, DDCSV. Choose the correct answer. Correct answer is option D, subject area, comma, data source, comma, YYYY, comma, MM, comma, DD, file data, YYYY, MM, DDCSV. Question 5. You need to design an Azure Synapse Analytics dedicated SQL pool that meets the following requirements. Can return an employee record from a given point in time. Maintains the latest employee information. Minimizes query complexity. How should you model the employee data? Option A, as a temporal table. Option B, as a SQL graph table. Option C, as a degenerate dimension table. Option D, as a type 2 slowly changing dimension SCD table. Choose the correct answer. Correct answer is option D, as a type 2 slowly changing dimension SCD table. Question 6. You have an enterprise-wide Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 account. The data lake is accessible only through an Azure virtual network named VNET1. You are building a SQL pool in Azure Synapse that will use data from the data lake. Your company has a sales team. All the members of the sales team are in an Azure Active Directory group named Sales. POSIX controls are used to assign the sales group access to the files in the data lake. You plan to load data to the SQL pool every hour. You need to ensure that the SQL pool can load the sales data from the data lake. Which 3 actions should you perform? Each correct answer presents part of the solution. Note: each area selection is worth 1 point. Option A, add the managed identity to the sales group. Option B, use the managed identity as the credentials for the data load process. Option C, create a shared access signature SAS. Option D, add your Azure Active Directory Azure AD account to the sales group. Option E, use the shared access signature SAS as the credentials for the data load process. Option F, create a managed identity. Choose the correct answer. Correct answer is option A, add the managed identity to the sales group. Option B, use the managed identity as the credentials for the data load process. Option F, create a managed identity. Question 7. You have an Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 container that contains 100 terabytes of data. You need to ensure that the data in the container is available for read workloads in a secondary region if an outage occurs in the primary region. The solution must minimize costs. Which type of data redundancy should you use? Option A, geo-redundant storage GRS. Option B, read access geo-redundant storage RAGRS. Option C, zone redundant storage ZRS. Option D, locally redundant storage LRS. Choose the correct answer. Correct answer is option A, geo-redundant storage GRS. Question 8. You plan to implement an Azure Data Lake Gen 2 storage account. You need to ensure that the data lake will remain available if a data center fails in the primary Azure region. The solution must minimize costs. Which type of replication should you use for the storage account? Option A, geo-redundant storage GRS. Option B, geo-zone redundant storage GZRS. Option C, locally redundant storage LRS. Option D, zone redundant storage ZRS. Choose the correct answer. Correct answer is option D, zone redundant storage ZRS. Question 9. You are designing a fact table named Fact Purchase in an Azure Synapse Analytics dedicated SQL pool. The table contains purchases from suppliers for a retail store. Fact Purchase will contain the following columns. Fact Purchase will have 1 million rows of data added daily and will contain 3 years of data. Transact SQL queries similar to the following query will be executed daily. Select supplier key. Stock item key is order finalized. Count from Fact Purchase where date key equals 2 crore 2,10,101 and date key equals 2 crore 2,10,131. Group by supplier key. Stock item key is order finalized. Which table distribution will minimize query times? Option A, replicated. Option B, hash distributed on purchase key. Option C, round robin. Option D, hash distributed on is order finalized. Choose the correct answer. Correct answer is option B, hash distributed on purchase key. Question 10. Note: this question is part of a series of questions that present the same scenario. Each question in the series contains a unique solution that might meet the stated goals. Some question sets might have more than one correct solution, while others might not have a correct solution. After you answer a question in this section, you will not be able to return to it. As a result, these questions will not appear in the review screen. You have an Azure storage account that contains 100 gigabytes of files. The files contain rows of text and numerical values. 75% of the rows contain description data that has an average length of 1.1 megabytes. You plan to copy the data from the storage account to an enterprise data warehouse in Azure Synapse Analytics. You need to prepare the files to ensure that the data copies quickly. Solution: you convert the files to compressed, delimited text files. Does this meet the goal? Option A, yes. Option B, no. Choose the correct answer. Correct answer is option A, yes. Question 11. Note: this question is part of a series of questions that present the same scenario. Each question in the series contains a unique solution that might meet the stated goals. Some question sets might have more than one correct solution, while others might not have a correct solution. After you answer a question in this section, you will not be able to return to it. As a result, these questions will not appear in the review screen. You have an Azure storage account that contains 100 gigabytes of files. The files contain rows of text and numerical values. 75% of the rows contain description data that has an average length of 1.1 megabytes. You plan to copy the data from the storage account to an enterprise data warehouse in Azure Synapse Analytics. You need to prepare the files to ensure that the data copies quickly. Solution: you copy the files to a table that has a column store index. Does this meet the goal? Option A, yes. Option B, no. Choose the correct answer. Correct answer is option B, no. Question 12. Note: this question is part of a series of questions that present the same scenario. Each question in the series contains a unique solution that might meet the stated goals. Some question sets might have more than one correct solution, while others might not have a correct solution. After you answer a question in this section, you will not be able to return to it. As a result, these questions will not appear in the review screen. You have an Azure storage account that contains 100 gigabytes of files. The files contain rows of text and numerical values. 75% of the rows contain description data that has an average length of 1.1 megabytes. You plan to copy the data from the storage account to an enterprise data warehouse in Azure Synapse Analytics. You need to prepare the files to ensure that the data copies quickly. Solution. You modify the files to ensure that each row is more than 1 megabyte. Does this meet the goal? Option A, yes. Option B, no. Choose the correct answer. Correct answer is option B, no. Question 13. You build a data warehouse in an Azure Synapse Analytics dedicated SQL pool. Analysts write a complex select query that contains multiple join and case statements to transform data for use in inventory reports. The inventory reports will use the data and additional where parameters depending on the report. The reports will be produced once daily. You need to implement a solution to make the dataset available for the reports. The solution must minimize query times. What should you implement? Option A, an ordered clustered column store index. Option B, a materialized view. Option C, result set caching. Option D, a replicated table. Choose the correct answer. Correct answer is option B, a materialized view. Question 14. You have an Azure Synapse Analytics workspace named WS1 that contains an Apache Spark pool named Pool1. You plan to create a database named DB1 in Pool1. You need to ensure that when tables are created in DB1, the tables are available automatically as external tables to the built-in serverless SQL pool. Which format should you use for the tables in DB1? Option A, CSV. Option B, awk. Option C, JSON. Option D, Percolate. Choose the correct answer. Correct answer is option A, CSV. Option D, Percolate. Question 15. You are planning a solution to aggregate streaming data that originates in Apache Kafka and is output to Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2. The developers who will implement the stream processing solution use Java. Which service should you recommend using to process the streaming data? Option A, Azure Event Hubs. Option B, Azure Data Factory. Option C, Azure Stream Analytics. Option D, Azure Databricks. Choose the correct answer. Correct answer is option D, Azure Databricks. Question 16. You plan to implement an Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 container that will contain CSV files. The size of the files will vary based on the number of events that occur per hour. File sizes range from 4 kilobytes to 5 gigabytes. You need to ensure that the files stored in the container are optimized for batch processing. What should you do? Option A, convert the files to JSON. Option B, convert the files to Avro. Option C, compress the files. Option D, merge the files. Choose the correct answer. Correct answer is option D, merge the files. Question 17. You are designing a financial transactions table in an Azure Synapse Analytics dedicated SQL pool. The table will have a clustered column and store index and will include the following columns. Transaction type, 40 million rows per transaction type. Customer segment, 4 million per customer segment. Transaction month, 65 million rows per month. Account type, 500 million per account type. You have the following query requirements. Analysts will most commonly analyze transactions for a given month. Transactions analysts will typically summarize transactions by transaction type, customer segment, and/or account type. You need to recommend a partition strategy for the table to minimize query times. On which column should you recommend partitioning the table? Option A, customer segment. Option B, account type. Option C, transaction type. Option D, transaction month. Choose the correct answer. Correct answer is option D, transaction month. Question 18. You plan to ingest streaming social media data by using Azure Stream Analytics. The data will be stored in files in Azure Data Lake Storage and then consumed by using Azure Databricks and Polybase in Azure Synapse Analytics. You need to recommend a Stream Analytics data output format to ensure that the queries from Databricks and Polybase against the files encounter the fewest possible errors. The solution must ensure that the files can be queried quickly and that the data type information is retained. What should you recommend? Option A, JSON. Option B, Percolate. Option C, CSV. Option D, Avro. Choose the correct answer. Correct answer is option B, Percolate. Question 19. You have an Azure Synapse Analytics dedicated SQL pool named Pool 1. Pool 1 contains a partition fact table named DBO sales and a staging table named STG sales that has the matching table and partition definitions. You need to overwrite the content of the first partition in DBO sales with the content of the same partition in STG sales. The solution must minimize load times. What should you do? Option A, insert the data from STG sales into DBO sales. Option B, switch the first partition from DBO sales to STG sales. Option C, switch the first partition from STG sales to DBO sales. Option D, update DBO sales from STG sales. Choose the correct answer. Correct answer is option C, switch the first partition from STG sales to DBO sales. Question 20. You are designing a slowly changing dimension SCD for supplier data in an Azure Synapse Analytics dedicated SQL pool. You plan to keep record of changes to the available fields. The supplier data contains the following columns. Which three additional columns should you add to the data to create a type to SCD? Each correct answer presents part of the solution. Note: each correct selection is worth 1 point. Option A, surrogate primary key. Option B, effective start date. Option C, business key. Option D, last modified date. Option E, effective end date. Option F, foreign key. Choose the correct answer. Correct answer is option A, surrogate primary key. Option B, effective start date. Option E, effective end date. Question 21. You are designing a partition strategy for a fact table in an Azure Synapse Analytics dedicated SQL pool. The table has the following specifications. Contains sales data for 20,000 products. Use hash distribution on a column named product id. Contain 2.4 billion records for the years 2019 and 2020. Which number of partition ranges provides optimal compression and performance for the clustered column store index? Option A, 40. Option B, 240. Option C, 400. Option D, 2400. Choose the correct answer. Correct answer is option A, 40. Question 22. You are designing a fact table named Fact Purchase in an Azure Synapse Analytics dedicated SQL pool. The table contains purchases from suppliers for a retail store. Fact Purchase will contain the following columns. Fact Purchase will have 1 million rows of data added daily and will contain 3 years of data. Transact SQL queries similar to the following query will be executed daily. Select supplier key, stock item key, count, from fact purchase with date key, equals 2,210,101 and date key, equals 2,210,131. Group by supplier key, Stock item key. Which table distribution will minimize query times? Option A, replicated. Option B, hash distributed on purchase key. Option C, round robin. Option D, hash distributed on date key. Choose the correct answer. Correct answer is option B, hash distributed on purchase key. Question 23. You are implementing a batch dataset in the per query form. Data files will be produced by using Azure Data Factory and stored in Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2. The files will be consumed by an Azure Synapse Analytics serverless SQL pool. You need to minimize storage costs for the solution. What should you do? Option A, use snappy compression for the files. Option B, use OpenBrowser to query the Parquet files. Option C, create an external table that contains a subset of columns from the per query files. Option D, store all data as string in the Parquet files. Choose the correct answer. Correct answer is option A, use snappy compression for the files. Question 24. You are designing a data marath for the human resources HR department at your company. The data marath will contain employee information and employee transactions from a source system. You have a flat extract that has the following fields: employee ID, first name, last name, recipient, gross amount, transaction ID, government ID, net amount paid, transaction date. You need to design a star schema data model in an Azure Synapse Analytics dedicated SQL pool for the data mart. Which two tables should you create? Each correct answer presents part of the solution. Note: each correct selection is worth 1 point. Option A, a dimension table for transaction. Option B, a dimension table for employee transaction. Option C, a dimension table for employee. Option D, a fact table for employee. Option E, a fact table for transaction. Choose the correct answer. Correct answer is option C, a dimension table for employee. Option E, a fact table for transaction. Question 25. You are designing a dimension table for a data warehouse. The table will track the value of the dimension attributes over time and preserve the history of the data by adding new rows as the data changes. Which type of slowly changing dimension SCD should you use? Option A, type 0. Option B, type 1. Option C, type 2. Option D, type 3. Choose the correct answer. Correct answer is option C, type 2. Question 26. You are performing exploratory analysis of the busware data in an Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 account by using an Azure Synapse Analytics serverless SQL pool. You execute the transact SQL query shown in the following exhibit. What do the query results include? Option A, only CSV files in the trip data 2020 subfolder. Option B, all files that have file names that beginning with trip data 2020. Option C, all CSV files that have file names that contain trip data 2020. Option D, only CSV that have file names that beginning with trip data 2020. Choose the correct answer. Correct answer is option D, only CSV that have file names that beginning with trip data 2020. Question 27. You have an Azure Synapse Analytics Apache Spark pool named Pool 1. You plan to load JSON files from an Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 container into the tables in Pool 1. The structure and data types vary by file. You need to load the files into the tables. The solution must maintain the source data types. What should you do? Option A, use a conditional split transformation in an Azure Synapse data flow. Option B, Use a get metadata activity in Azure Data Factory. Option C. Load the data by using the Open Browser Transact SQL command in an Azure Synapse Analytics Serverless SQL pool. Option D. Load the data by using PySpark. Choose the correct answer. Correct answer is option D. Load the data by using PySpark. Question 28. You have an Azure Databricks workspace named Workspace 1 in the standard pricing tier. Workspace 1 contains an all-purpose cluster named Cluster 1. You need to reduce the time it takes for Cluster 1 to start and scale up. The solution must minimize costs. What should you do first? Option A. Configure a global init script for Workspace 1. Option B. Create a cluster policy in Workspace 1. Option C. Upgrade Workspace 1 to the premium pricing tier. Option D. Create a pool in Workspace 1. Choose the correct answer. Correct answer is option D. Create a pool in Workspace 1. Question 29. You have an Azure subscription that contains an Azure Blob Storage account named Storage 1 and an Azure Synapse Analytics dedicated SQL pool named Pool 1. You need to store data in Storage 1. The data will be read by Pool 1. The solution must meet the following requirements. Enable Pool 1 to skip columns and rows that are unnecessary in a query. Automatically create column statistics. Minimize the size of files. Which type of file should you use? Option A. JSON. Option B. Percolate. Option C. Avro. Option D. CSV. Choose the correct answer. Correct answer is option B. Percolate. Question 30. You have an Azure Synapse Analytics dedicated SQL pool that contains a table named Table 1. Table 1 contains the following: 1 billion rows, a clustered column store index, a hash, distributed column name product key, a column named sales date that is of the date data type and cannot be null. 30 million rows will be added to table 1 each month. You need to partition table 1 based on the sales date column. The solution must optimize query performance and data loading. How often should you create a partition? Option A. Once per month. Option B. Once per year. Option C. Once per day. Option D. Once per week. Choose the correct answer. Correct answer is option B. Once per year. Question 31. You have an Azure Databricks workspace that contains a Delta Lake dimension table named Table 1. Table 1 is a Type 2 slowly changing dimension SCD table. You need to apply updates from a source table to Table 1. Which Apache Spark SQL operation should you use? Option A. Create. Option B. Update. Option C. Alter. Option D. Merge. Choose the correct answer. Correct answer is option D. Merge. Question 32. You are designing an Azure Data Lake storage solution that will transform raw JSON files for use in an analytical workload. You need to recommend a format for the transformed files. The solution must meet the following requirements. Contain information about the data types of each column in the files. Support querying a subset of columns in the files. Support read heavy analytical workloads. Minimize the file size. What should you recommend? Option A. JSON. Option B. CSV. Option C. Apache Avro. Option D. Apache Percolate. Choose the correct answer. Correct answer is option D. Apache Percolate. Question 33. Note: this question is part of a series of questions that present the same scenario. Each question in the series contains a unique solution that might meet the stated goals. Some question sets might have more than one correct solution, while others might not have a correct solution. After you answer a question in this section, you will not be able to return to it. As a result, these questions will not appear in the review screen. You have an Azure storage account that contains 100 gigabytes of files. The files contain rows of text and numerical values. 75% of the rows contain description data that has an average length of 1.1 megabytes. You plan to copy the data from the storage account to an enterprise data warehouse in Azure Synapse Analytics. You need to prepare the files to ensure that the data copies quickly. Solution: you modify the files to ensure that each row is less than 1 megabyte. Does this meet the goal? Option A: yes. Option B: no. Choose the correct answer. Correct answer is option A, yes. Question 34. You plan to create a dimension table in Azure Synapse Analytics that will be less than 1 gigabyte. You need to create the table to meet the following requirements. Provide the fastest query time. Minimize data movement during queries. Which type of table should you use? Option A: replicated. Option B: hash distributed. Option C: heap. Option D: round robin. Choose the correct answer. Correct answer is option A: replicated. Question 35. You are designing a dimension table in an Azure Synapse Analytics dedicated SQL pool. You need to create a surrogate key for the table. The solution must provide the fastest query performance. What should you use for the surrogate key? Option A: a GUID column. Option B: a sequence object. Option C: an identity column. Choose the correct answer. Correct answer is option C: an identity column. Question 36. You have an Azure Synapse Analytics dedicated SQL pool. You need to create a fact table named Table 1 that will store sales data from the last 3 years. The solution must be optimized for the following query operations: show order counts by week, calculate sales totals by region, calculate sales totals by product, find all the orders from a given month. Which data should you use to partition table 1? Option A: product. Option B: month. Option C: week. Option D: region. Choose the correct answer. Correct answer is option B: month. Question 37. You are designing the folder structure for an Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 account. You identify the following usage patterns. Users will query data by using Azure Synapse Analytics Serverless SQL pools and Azure Synapse Analytics Serverless Apache Spark pools. Most queries will include a filter on the current year or week. Data will be secured by data source. You need to recommend a folder structure that meets the following requirements: supports the usage pattern, simplifies folder security, minimizes query times. Which folder structure should you recommend? Option A: data source subject area YYYYWW filled at a YYYYMMPD Parquet. Option B: data source subject area YYYYWW filled at a YYYYMMPD Parquet. Option C: data source subject area WWYYYY filled at a YYYYMMPD Parquet. Option D: YYYYWW data source subject area filled at a YYYYMMPD Parquet. Option E: WWYYYY subject area data source filled at a YYYYMMDD Parquet. Choose the correct answer. Correct answer is Option A, data source subject area YYYYWW fill header a YYYYMMDD packet. Question 38. You have an Azure Synapse Analytics dedicated SQL pool named Pool 1. Pool 1 contains a table named Table 1. You load 5 terabytes of data into Table 1. You need to ensure that column stock compression is maximized for Table 1. Which statement should you execute? Option A, DBCC index.frag, Pool 1, Table 1. Option B, DBCC index, Table 1. Option C, alter index all on Table 1 reorganize. Option D, alter index all on Table 1 rebuild. Choose the correct answer. Correct answer is option D, alter index all on Table 1 rebuild. Question 39. You have an Azure Synapse Analytics dedicated SQL pool named Pool 1. You plan to implement a star schema in pool and create a new table named dim customer by using the following code. You need to ensure that dim customer has the necessary columns to support a type 2 slowly changing dimension SCD. Which what 4 columns should you add? Each correct answer presents part of the solution node. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. Option A, historical salesperson, voucher, 256 not null. Option B, effective and date, daytime not null. Option C, previous modified date, daytime not null. Option D, row Eid, digit not null. Option E, effective start date, daytime not null. Choose the correct answer. Correct answer is option B, effective and date, daytime not null. Option E, effective start date, daytime not null. Question 40. You have an Azure subscription that contains an Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 account named Account 1 and an Azure Synapse Analytics workspace named Workspace 1. You need to create an external table in a serverless SQL pool in Workspace 1. The external table will reference CSV files stored in Account 1. The solution must maximize performance. How should you configure the external table? Option A, use a native external table and authenticate by using a shared access signature SAS. Option B, use a native external table and authenticate by using a storage account key. Option C, use an Apache Hadoop external table and authenticate by using a shared access signature SAS. Option D, use an Apache Hadoop external table and authenticate by using a service principal in Microsoft Azure Active Directory. Azure AD, part of Microsoft Entra. Choose the correct answer. Correct answer is option A, use a native external table and authenticate by using a shared access signature SAS.